Check out the Full Press Hockey Podcast with Jim Biringer, the best in the business. It's going to be great.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is NHL Rumors here on Full Press Hockey. I'm your host, Jim Biringer, rocking and rolling with my tag team partner, David Calabretta. Yes, fans, the Dream Team is back together. Little hiatus here for the holidays, dealing with the World Juniors and a Winter Classic, but we're back bringing you the latest rumors with the New Jersey Devils, Montreal Canadiens. We'll touch on Vancouver Canucks as well, Colorado Avalanche, bring you around the league. David, welcome back, bud.
Feels great to be back. It's been a while, Jim.
Yeah, we've been killing it. People have been asking about us, right?
Nah, I'm right. I gotten some texts.
They were asking about the Dream Team. Well, the Dream Team's here. We got to start off with the big hot topic of conversation. I think we were talking about it on one of the episodes prior to the holiday trade freeze, prior to the new year. J.T. Miller and Elias Pettersson is a big story out of Vancouver, and it feels like a Roberto Luongo, Corey Schneider situation all over again. It's not like those guys had tension. I don't think they ever had tension there, not like Pettersson and Miller, but it feels like the Canucks could go down the same road. And could they make the same mistake twice, getting rid of two guys?
It could trend that way if they don't fix it up right now. I could be wrong here, but the Canucks are 2-9 in their last 11 games, and they're currently on a 3-game losing streak here. And look, they've gotten overtime loser points, but at the end of the day, they're slipping. They hold the second wildcard spot, and Calgary Flames are right up their alley with 1 point, and the St. Louis Blues are 2 points off them. And this is not a position the Vancouver Canucks are expecting going into the season, because there's so much talent around that roster. It's just like in a workplace, when two people don't get along, everyone gets affected. And this needs to get solved ASAP.
And we mentioned it on one of our later episodes before the holidays. We talked about it. It felt like they were choosing J.T. Miller over Elias Pettersson, but it seems like they're taking calls on both players. You know, we've seen Boston. There were reports about the New York Rangers. And obviously the Rangers and the Vancouver Canucks. You know, obviously J.T. Miller's played for the Rangers before. They wanted to do a 1-for-1 trade. It got denied. Obviously, Mikko Rantanen has a full no movement clause. But the Boston Bruins are still looking for a number one center. Carolina's looking for a center. But again, remember last year, Pettersson was potentially going to be a part of a trade going to Carolina if Marty Necas was a part of that package. Carolina said, no, we don't want to give up Necas. Both players signed longer-term deals. Necas signed a shorter-term deal. But it feels like, you know what? Now, it feels like Pettersson could be traded over Miller, because it just seems like his game is getting affected so much by what's going on with Miller being there. Because before Miller came back, he was on a tear.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they were in town earlier this week. They're in Montreal, and Miller got 4 points, and he was all over the ice. And it looked like a Miller that was practically unfazed. Like, he wasn't really affected by what's going on. And you don't really see that with Pettersson. You see a Pettersson who's just, it's like he's like, okay, this is going to get figured out soon. So, like, there's no need to really play to my abilities right now. That's what it looks like. And when in a management standpoint, you look at that and you're like, okay, we need someone who, if this situation doesn't get better, who's handling it better? It's J.T. Miller. Do I think that the Canucks should get rid of Pettersson before J.T. Miller? Personally, no, because Pettersson is 25 years old. He is young. Miller is 30.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, like, that's a big age gap, and you obviously want to go towards the youth here, but I really think that if there's someone going, I think it's Elias Pettersson.
But the issue is, you mentioned it before. Look, yes, they're 2-9 in the last 11 games, but yes, they're still in a wild card position. And I think that's what makes things so difficult for the Vancouver Canucks right now, is because they're in a wild card position. Like, they still believe that this team can turn it around, and they're hesitant to make a trade like that, to move a guy like that, because if you're going to move players like that, you're going to want something in return, and you're going to want something in return that keeps you in contender status and in the playoff picture. You're not just going to give these guys away for nothing. And we know Brock Besser's, a UFA at the end of the year. and they're looking for D and they're looking for forward depth. And I think that's what they want if they're going to get a player like that. And I want to run this one by you. You're a guy that always likes to come up with trade scenarios. Well, I'm here coming up with trade package scenarios because everybody talks about what they could get. Well, I think if you look at the deal that what Vancouver could get, if you look at the deal what the Winnipeg Jets got for Pierre-Luc Dubois, that's something that Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford may want to look at. A 4-piece kind of deal that gets you role players within your team and a draft pick you can use later.
Yeah, look, before we go into that, the one thing we got to make clear here, the Vancouver Canucks are not winning an Elias Pettersson trade.
No.
They're not winning a J.T. Miller trade.
No.
Because GMs are taking advantage of a crappy situation in Vancouver. Look, Vancouver are they're going to look desperate when trying to trade Pettersson Miller mid-season. But like you said, I think they need to get as much assets possible, but want assets that could play as of now, that could help them continue making their push in the playoffs. So I think you're going to look for a top 4D. That's someone the Vancouver Canucks really, really need. I was looking at their defensive core. Tyler Myers, Vincent Desharnais, Noah Yolson. These guys are borderline 7th defensemen on other rosters. And, it's a job, a bit of the management, but it's a bit of a harsh one by me. But you have Quinn Hughes, Honeck, and after that, it's like, all right, let me just fill in the spots. So you look for a top 4D in this situation, a top 6 winger maybe, middle 9, a middle 6, something like that. A first-round pick and maybe another prospect. But like I said, they're going to have to be really, really ready to get rid of him because they might not like the offers coming their way.
No, and that's why it was so interesting when, the Canucks were trying to get Dylan Cousins or Bo Byram or Owen Power out of Buffalo when the teams were talking about trying to make a trade for one of these players. And yeah, Miller's rise to the occasion. JT Miller rose to the occasion during his contract year too, when he was on fire. Then he got paid. And now both guys are getting paid. It's an interesting situation in Vancouver because there's so much potential there, especially if Thatcher Demko's healthy. They can go on a run, but they got to clean it up in the room. And until one of these guys get moved on, I think the struggles are going to continue. Who do you, before we move on, who do you think gets moved first? Is it Miller or is it Pettersson, or does this not happen until the summer?
I think it's something they might ride till the end of the season, but if the results continue like this, someone's going to be gone before March 7th, when the trade deadline happens. But I think if it's one person going, I think there would be more interest for Pettersson than Miller. I think it would be easier to trade Miller to the Rangers because I think there's a lot of pieces in New York that could really get it done. But if you take away New York from the Miller perspective, there's not much other teams that would take on JT Miller as opposed to Elias Pettersson. So I think Pettersson's the odd man out. What about you?
I think if you look at the two teams out east, I think Boston and New York would be the two teams for Miller. And I think Boston, you could throw Boston in there for Pettersson too. But I think if those two teams fall out of it and don't want to give up the assets for a guy like Miller, then I think Pettersson probably goes before Miller goes. And then maybe they don't even make a Miller trade if Pettersson goes. Maybe they get the assets back. So it's an interesting situation in Vancouver to watch moving forward. Another interesting situation is in Colorado right now because there's an unrestricted free agent. Well, he's one of, I guess we could call the big three this summer if they all get there with Mikko Rantanen, John Tavares in Toronto and Mitch Marner in Toronto. But Mikko Rantanen is a guy that the Colorado Avalanche have yet to sign. Many people thought he would have signed an extension by now, but he's shelved those contract talks. And you put out a tweet the other day. You want to repeat it?
Yeah, so it was not really my scoop, but, obviously I was listening to French media, so I wanted to share with my English audience. Renaud Lavoie from TVA said that if the Avalanche don't re-sign Mikko Rantanen now to the trade deadline, they're going to explore a possibility of a trade. And again, I don't know how you could win a Mikko Rantanen trade mid-season, Jim, but I find it really concerning that there is no contract. extension to this point. And it just shows how much Mikko Rantanen is betting on himself, rightfully so, because he's having an amazing season. But it just shows he wants to get paid big bucks.
Well, I mean, if you look out west, I think the two best dynamic duos in the league right now are both, one plays in Edmonton with Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, and the other is Nathan MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen, and they feed off each other so well. I think those are the two horses in Colorado. And I agree, he is betting on himself, and it's been reported at the beginning of the year, and I think Adrian Dater had this, so I'm going to credit him as well on this, that Rantanen was looking for $14 million. And they shelved talks to the end of the season because he wants to be paid more than MacKinnon. Rightfully, whether it's right or wrong, whether Chris McFarland, the GM of the Avalanche, has an internal salary cap or not, the salary cap's going up. And to pay him less than Nathan MacKinnon, you know what? Unfortunately, he's getting Rantanen, whatever number Rantanen gets, he's going to be passed by McDavid and so on and so on and so on. But it's very interesting because you and I were having a conversation off air, and I said this: if they are going to trade him, I don't expect them to trade him mid-season because of what they want to do. They just reshaped their goaltending. They want to take a run at a Stanley Cup. To me, if they don't have him re-signed, or they know they can't re-sign him before July 1st, if, say, they go on a deep run, I think they try to trade him like similar to what we saw with like Jake Gessel, trade him to the destination he wants to, and where they know that the contract's going to be in place.
Yeah, and another thing is it's going to be a fun year for free agents this summer because with the cap going up, they're going to ask for more money, and it's going to be the reality. You have to be ready to pay these guys because the cap's going up, what, $5 million?
Yeah.
So, I'm not going to get into the math here, but 14 million today and 14 million on July 1st, it's a bit different. There's a lot of money math you have to do. So I think, I'm Colorado GM and Rantanen comes up to me and wants 14 million. I give him that.
So do I.
And the thing is now is, like you said, a Jake Gensel trade, like in the summer, it's what Colorado's going to get, what, a third, fourth round pick maybe for his rights?
Yeah, for his rights. But you're going to – but he went to Tampa knowing he was going to sign in Tampa.
Yeah, of course. You have to know that he's signing there.
Right.
But the thing is maybe Colorado wants more in a mid-season trade, but I don't know what more could be. But look, I'll throw another trade proposal. Let's get it out of here. Mikko Rantanen and Elias Pettersson.
It's not a bad trade.
Maybe Vancouver's giving up a lot if you look at it in the perspective that Rantanen has 1 year left and he's a free agent. But if Mikko Rantanen says, okay, you do this trade, I'll sign with Vancouver, I do it.
I would do it. I would do it.
I do it for both
parties. And it
parties.
gives Colorado the center depth that they've been looking for, too.
Exactly. So I think that's the only trade Colorado could walk on and say, okay, we traded a superstar, we got a superstar, a borderline superstar.
Right. But again, I don't know how you can make that trade like mid-season without making your team worse because they're already missing that. Like Nazem Kadri's not there to replace Rantanen or MacKinnon if they go down. Like Gabe Landeskog, we hope he comes back, but he's probably not playing again this season with his injury and all that, and they're going to be operating LTIR. So I think any trade involving Rantanen, I think waits to the offseason. That's just my opinion. Just because I just don't think Colorado, with their win now mode, will want to give up on a player like that. Be similar situation in Toronto with Marner or Tavares. Like,
they're not going to trade them because
you're not going to trade them. Why? That hurts your chances of making a run and winning a Stanley Cup. Okay, you win a Stanley Cup with pending unrestricted free agents. All well and good. He walks. Okay, guess what?
Like Florida.
Exactly.
And the thing is, Colorado gets rid of Rantanen. I don't like their odds even going into round one.
No, neither do I.
It's a big, big hole because Colorado's team is built off their stars, MacKinnon, Makar, Rantanen. But after that, it's borderline and like maybe a bit harsh, but borderline top 6 forwards.
Right.
Arturi Lehkonen, amazing player, but could he take on that role as the second best forward on the team? Casey Middlestad, they're great players, but to say that they're going to be able to carry that workload, going into the playoffs, I don't know. I don't know what
They're
Colorado.
more support players, in my opinion, like Nichushkin, Lehkonen, and Middlestead, because that's why they work so well together, because you have those two horses there already driving the opponent's best defense. Those guys are open all the time. So I wouldn't make this trade midseason if I'm Colorado, but it has to be an option on the table, especially if a guy's looking for $14 million. But a guy like Rantanen deserves $14 million.
Yeah, maybe it's a pressure tactic, a slight pressure tactic to try and get a deal done here. Because, if I'm Mikko Rantanen and I hear this news and I find out I could be traded midseason to a team, obviously it's going to be a team he wants to go to.
Right.
I'm sure when you think of it, he wants to be an Avalanche still.
Yeah, he does.
And he just wants to get paid, and he's going to get paid regardless. If it's not in Colorado, it's going to be elsewhere and even more.
I agree with that. Speaking of elsewhere, going around the league, let's head up to Montreal, your neck of the woods. Montreal Canadiens just playing meaningful hockey. Expected this season was to play meaningful hockey. That was their next step. Look, their November wasn't great. We documented it. We talked about Kirby Dach. We talked about Jake Evans. Full Press Hockey, our Rumors podcast, our clips. We had things out there about Jake Evans potentially being on the move if they couldn't re-sign him. They haven't really talked, money yet. But, the way he's playing, on pace for 20 goals. He's got 23 points right now. He's a player that's drawing a lot of interest from a lot of cup contending teams. Montreal's in the thick of things. They have a lot of players like Armia, like Dvorak, Savard, Matheson, all those guys. What do you think Montreal is going to do if they're in this position at the trade deadline?
Well, right now the Canadiens sit 3 points off a wildcard spot. But I also tweeted something out. They have 4 games in hand on the Boston Bruins. And they are 3 points off the Boston Bruins. So Montreal is not only in a good position, they're in an amazing position to succeed here. But look, this weekend, they're playing the first place Washington Capitals. They're playing the Dallas Stars. And then if you go down the list of their next few games, there's Dallas again, Toronto, the Rangers, the Lightning. So they have a lot of hard games coming up, and they've done good in the past. But I think at the deadline, let's say they're in the same position as today, 3 points off. Kent Hughes is going to have to really, I'm sure in the next month, he's going to be talking a lot to the Evans camp and see what they want. But the reality is they might get an offer they can't refuse. They might get an offer they can't refuse at the deadline, because if you go back 3 years ago, Kent Hughes didn't want to trade Lehkonen. And in the final hour, he did, because he got an offer he couldn't refuse at the time. If you go back and look at it now, would I have done that trade? No. But at the time, you were getting a second round pick and a B prospect. So if I'm Kent Hughes, I really see, I listen to everything that's out there. But what I think Montreal's going to do with their 3 points off, unless you get a crazy offer, I think Jake Evans is staying put.
Right, and right now their success, if you look at it, is bought Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon some time here, because if they had been in the skids, I think more teams would be calling them about players like Armia, like Savard, guys like that, especially Jake Evans, trying to get things rolling before the trade deadline. But now that they've been winning, teams are like, okay, let's see if this continues. I know, as it's been reported, and we've talked about it, the Devils have needed center depth, and I think Jake Evans would be a good player for them to round out their bottom 6 forwards, because they need help in their center depth. And look, I wrote about it in my article on fullpresshockey.com that if you look at it, if you look at going rates for fourth line centers, I agree. Like, you can't pay a guy $3.5 million, or else he's going to become a cap casualty down the road. We saw it with Barclay Goodrow in New York. Like, he's going to be one of the first guys to be on the top of the list to try to shed some money. He's having a great season, but his value's been never higher. So I think he's definitely a player that I could see being on the move. And if they're really tried and true to this rebuild, and, okay, it's about playing meaningful hockey, do we have enough in the cupboard, like a guy like Owen Beck coming up, that can replace Evans and we can still stay competitive? That's something they have to weigh as well.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a situation like Philly last year. Right up the wild card spot, they're right there, but they had pending UFAs, guys that were commodities on the market. And one person I think Montreal is going to stick to their guns and really trade is David Savard.
Yes.
I think regardless, I'm not saying for sure, but I think even if Montreal sits in a wild card spot, let's just say, I think they pull the trigger on a Savard trade because the last 4 or 5 games, Savard hasn't even played for one.
Right.
He's been injured. And I think Kent Hughes would be comfortable giving Jaden Struble his minutes. And there's even Logan Mailloux in the minors. And the Carrier acquisition was basically like the sign that David Savard is probably gone.
Right.
And I saw something today. The Oilers have him heavy on their list.
Yeah.
And I think someone's really going to pay off for Savard. So that's one guy I think that's going to go. So kind of like Philly, right? With Sean Walker, they got rid of him. But they kept Scott Laughton. And that's similar to Jake Evans right now. So I think they're in a Philly situation.
No, I agree. And then Philly kind of tailed off after it, especially when Walker left out of the lineup. But feels like Montreal's a little bit more ahead of Philly, where Philly was when they were in that wild card position, because it feels like Montreal has more depth coming along when it comes to a situation. Say they move out a guy like David Savard, they have guys ready to pop in. At the time, Philadelphia didn't really have those guys. Yeah. So I think Montreal's in a better situation than Philadelphia was last year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, it's an exciting time in Montreal. Like on Monday after that win, you're walking around the streets or you're on the radio. That's all you hear. Montreal's in a playoff spot. Montreal's in a playoff spot. And it's exciting for the city. And look, the vibes are high in Montreal. Let's go down there in New Jersey. What's going on?
Look, the vibes down in New Jersey, look, when they win, everything's great. When they lose, everybody's jumping off a bridge. No pun intended. And please don't anybody do that. But that's how the expression goes. But yeah, I mean, 1-5 in the last 6, not really playing great hockey defensively. Consistency, goal scoring wise, you mentioned the name. I think that's something that's going to be brought up again. Is do they go after a guy like Brandon Saad out of St. Louis? I think that's a player that they could definitely use, especially in their top 6, because they're just not getting consistent goal scoring. Jacob Markstrom has been everything and more for this team, but defensively they're letting too many shots through now. Yeah, Markstrom is doing everything he can, but I said this at the beginning of the season. Sometimes teams rely on their goaltending too much to win them games. That's why the Rangers struggled so much. You're seeing New Jersey rely on their goalies to do more than being asked to do. Now, Markstrom can do it, but the rest of the team isn't following suit, and they need consistency out of their guys. They need consistency down the middle. They just don't have the depth. And I think Tom Fitzgerald is active in the market right now. I think he wants to add a scoring winger. I think he wants to add a center. Maybe he wants to add down on defense. And this team, needs to learn how to buy in and what it takes to play consistent hockey every night still. Like that West Coast thing through California was inexcusable if you want to call yourself a cup contending team. To not get any points out of Anaheim and San Jose, that's not good enough. Like, all right, yeah, the Habs can lose to Chicago, but they bounce back and beat Colorado shootout. And they're beating good teams. New Jersey, yeah, you're going to split that home and home with Carolina. But to lose late against Anaheim, to lose late against San Jose, not understanding what it takes to get points in this league. Yeah, you lose to LA, okay, that's fine. But then a game against the Rangers, trying to do too much. Yeah, you win late against Seattle, but this team has to start getting back to playing what Devils hockey is all about. And I think you're seeing they're maybe hitting a wall a little bit again, but they're also relying on Jacob Markstrom to do too much. However, they need help up front. It's clear.
Yeah. And you would think with the way you're describing them, the Devils are like out of a wild card. They're still 6th in the National Hockey League and 3rd in the conference. So I think obviously there's reason for concern, with how their last few games have gone. And it's not going to get any better with the Lightning, Panthers, and Leafs coming up for the Devils. Yeah. So these are 3 rough, tough games. But I think the problem is evident. I think, they need that goal scorer. They need some help in their bottom 6 because the reality is they're not really producing enough as much as they were at the start of the year. And I think the Devils, they need to be the Winnipeg Jets of the deadline last year.
Mm-hmm.
Adding Monahan, adding Toffoli, Colin Miller. They added, a lot of pieces. And obviously the Jets ran into the Colorado Avalanche, right? So that's That's the reality. But I think the Devils really need to have a good deadline, not by giving up too much, but finding the right pieces. And if I'm the Devils, not being biased here, Jake Evans should be someone you covet and you really pay up for.
Yeah. What do you think the asking price would be?
Well, I think the asking price to get rid of him for Montreal, for Kent Hughes to really accept, it's gonna have to start with a first-round pick.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I saw crazy proposals, and I don't know how you guys value this guy in New Jersey, but would you guys would it be any way possible a Nemec for Evans swap?
Potential. There's potential there. I wouldn't be shocked about it. I mean, I've heard rumblings that Montreal really likes him.
No, but would it be crazy on Devils' behalf to get rid of him for Evans? Or would Montreal have to add a bit?
Maybe add a little bit. But I could see it. I could see it because Casey's coming.
Because look, in Montreal, we like our prospects, and when someone would offer that to us, we'd say no way. So I want to see the perspective in New Jersey, and I think tonight you should maybe ask your Devils audience and see how they feel.
Yeah, I could ask him. Guys, leave in the comments. Let us know what you think a Simon Nemec for Jake Evans trade would look like. If that's something you would value. Does Montreal need to throw more things in? But I think the Devils could absolutely use him. Again, I think Brandon Saad's a good player you could look at. Again, depending if the Devils want to go UFA on a winger, Brock Besser. But this was an area of need this team needed to address in the offseason. I said it on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio with Mick Kern and Victoria Matiash in July. Everybody's picking up on it now. Everybody's picked up on our Jake Evans stuff as well here at Full Press Hockey. But if you look at it, it makes sense. New Jersey needs just a little bit more goal scoring. Timo Meier is doing okay this year. What they gave up and what he's making, does it correlate? Maybe give him a little bit more going, these line combinations, but I still think they overpaid for Dawson Mercer. Maybe they go after a guy like Kevin LeBanc at the deadline too, just to help with the goal scoring a little bit. So those are guys for me that I would watch for New Jersey moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much sums up what the Devils need to do. And like I said, Kevin LeBanc was at your training camp, so that's a horrible asset management perspective. But anyways, Jim, I want to go into to end it here with the wild card. It's the Eastern one to be specific. It is ridiculously close.
Mm-hmm.
And there is 7 points separating the New York Islanders to the Boston Bruins.
Wow.
So there is 10 teams right now in the mix for the wild card spot. I want to hear your two teams at the end of the season. Who do you think is going to be in the wild card positions?
So in the final wild card spots in the East, I mean, it's so close this year. I think it's going to really come down to the final weeks of the season. I want to say, if Linus Ullmark comes back healthy, the Ottawa Senators have the potential to be a wild card team and make the playoffs this year. I'm not sure the Columbus Blue Jackets are going to hold on. I don't think Pittsburgh makes it. Do I go homer and be like, well, can Ottawa and Montreal really make the playoffs this year?
That's what I want to hear. But, I mean, you can't count out the Bruins, right?
You can't count out the Bruins because they could turn it around, but they have issues there, which we can get to on another podcast because, oh, boy, is that a mess in Boston. I think the teams up front are really – I think Toronto, Florida, Tampa are going to be your top three in that division.
Yeah. I think the top three for each is pretty set right now.
I think the top three each is pretty set right now. I'm gonna go on a limb here. I'm gonna say Ottawa gets in. I think Boston falls out.
Wow.
And I think a lot of people may call them crazy, but I think they're starting to play a little bit better. They're not far out. I know they have a lot of teams to pass. But don't count out the New York Rangers.
I was just going to say that. Jim, you summed it up for me. I think, I don't know about Ottawa because I think Allmark's injury is a bit more serious. And they have no confidence in Anton Forsberg.
No.
If you watch the games, it's tough to see. Their guys are not healthy right now. And look, I think Ottawa could probably squeeze in. But look, I have the Rangers for sure.
Yeah.
I think the Rangers they just have that. They know how to win. Like, they know how to make the playoffs. Like,
Right.
they've been doing it. So, and I think they're climbing up. So they're 1 point behind Montreal, 1 point behind Ottawa. They have 3 games in hand on Boston. Yeah. So I got Rangers on one of the wildcard spots. And honestly, the last one, it's gonna go down to the wire. And I hate counting out the Bruins because every year they prove me wrong.
Right.
I really think this is the end for the Bruins.
Me too.
I really think this is the nail in the coffin. So I got New York, and I got a crazy one here. I got the Detroit Red Wings.
Look, that's not a bad pick. I think a lot of people expected Detroit to make the playoffs this year. I think I had them in a playoff spot at the beginning of the year. Again, it all comes down to Allmark's injury for Ottawa. If he can come back and get back between the pipes, we saw what that Sens team is with him between the pipes and what he was looking like. He was back to Vezina caliber, Vezina form for the Ottawa Senators. But those are 2 good picks. I mean, I can't disagree with the Detroit or New York either. I mean, I think we both think the Rangers are turning this thing around despite what happened at the beginning of the year. But, me and you both think that this is the end for the Boston Bruins, and somebody else from that Atlantic division is going to get in, whether it's Ottawa or Detroit. Maybe Montreal sneaks in, who knows? But
I wanted to say Montreal, but you know what? I don't want to jinx them.
No, and I think they're going to play meaningful hockey all the way up until the end, too.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a race in the Eastern Conference. Honestly, it's really, really close. And the Columbus have shocked everyone. That's one thing.
Yeah, they have. I don't know if they make it, but I think they're going to be in the end, to be there until the end as well.
Yeah, I'll swallow the pill. I mean, I had them last place in the National Hockey League going into the season. So that's just a reminder to everyone watching. Even the best people get it wrong. So
exactly. And I'm glad Columbus is doing well. So that's the biggest thing. But guys, this has been a Full Press Hockey Podcast, our NHL Rumors segment. Wrapping it up with some wildcard talk. Jim Biringer here. David Calabretta. Get it, iTunes, Spotify. Also subscribe to YouTube as well. Stay notified. Like the video as well. Leave some comments for us. Guys, we'll be back again next week. Take care.
Barry Trotz, Nashville Predators, making sure you're listening to Full Press Hockey Podcast.